Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to use the service entrance. This lobby is for guests. The man standing in front of the Alderton Grand didn't flinch. He was wearing work boots with dried mud on the soles, dark Carhartt pants, and a flannel shirt that had been washed so many times the plaid had faded into something closer to suggestion than pattern. He was carrying a canvas duffel bag, the kind you get at a hardware store. His hands were calloused. His face was weathered in the way that comes not from neglect but from decades of outdoor work, the sun and wind writing their history on a person whether they consent or not. The doorman, a young man named Stafford Yates, said it again. Louder this time. Sir, the service entrance is around the side. The man, his name was Owen Grady, though nobody at the Alderton Grand knew that yet, looked at Stafford the way a person looks at a child who has said something sincere but wrong, not unkindly, just with a patience that had been earned the hard way. I have a reservation, Owen said. Stafford's expression didn't change. I'm sure you do. He said it the way people say things when they don't believe a word of it. Owen Grady was 61 years old. He had started his working life at 17, doing demolition on a crew in Youngstown, Ohio. He had swung a sledgehammer, poured concrete, read blueprints in the dark with a flashlight, slept in his truck more nights than he could count. By the time he was 30, he had started his own crew. By 40, his own company. By 52, Grady Construction Group had built or renovated over 400 commercial properties across 11 states, including 2 hospitals, a federal courthouse, a university library that bore someone else's name even though Owen's company had saved the project from collapse after the original contractor walked off mid-job. He did not own a suit. He had owned one once for his son's wedding, but he had given it to Goodwill a few years later when his shoulders got broader and the jacket stopped fitting. He had never replaced it because he had never needed to. He conducted business the way he had always conducted it, with a handshake, a set of drawings, and the kind of track record that made titles and tailoring irrelevant. He was in Denver for a groundbreaking meeting. One of his project managers had booked the hotel. Owen had been traveling for work since before most of the Alderton Grand staff had been born, and he had never once thought to check what the lobby dress code was, because that had never been a relevant category of concern. It still shouldn't have been. Stafford Yates was 24, 8 months into his first job with real benefits, and deeply invested in maintaining what he privately thought of as the hotel's atmosphere. The Alderton Grand was not cheap. The room started at $400 a night. The lobby had marble floors and a fountain that was designed by someone whose name appeared in architectural magazines. The clientele wore things with small logos on them and arrived in cars with silent doors. Owen Grady did not fit Stafford's mental picture of that clientele, and so Stafford did what people do when reality doesn't match their expectations. He rejected the reality instead of updating the expectation. I'm going to need you to step aside, Stafford said. You're blocking the entrance for arriving guests. Owen looked behind him. The entrance was not blocked. There was no one waiting. My name is Owen Grady, he said. I have a reservation under that name, Suite 14B. You're welcome to check. Sir, you're welcome to check, Owen said again. Same tones, same patience. Stafford stepped back to the podium and made a show of looking at the screen. He scrolled. He squinted. He clicked something. He looked back up at Owen with the particular expression of someone who has decided to interpret ambiguous information in the least charitable direction possible. I'm not seeing anything. Try the company name, Owen said. Grady Construction Group. Stafford typed, paused. The reservation was there. Anyone could see it was there. But Stafford did something then that would cost him in ways he hadn't yet begun to calculate. He closed the window. I'm not finding it, he said. You're welcome to call reservations directly. There's a number on the website. Owen stood very still for a moment. Not with anger, with the specific stillness of a man who has been dismissed his entire life by people who would later come to deeply regret it. All right, he said. He stepped to the side. He pulled out his phone. And while Stafford returned to performing his role for no one in particular, Owen called his project manager. Inside the hotel, the lobby bar was doing its late afternoon business. A woman named Sandra Cho, 40-something, sharp, the kind of person who takes in a room in about 4 seconds, was sitting with her laptop and a glass of sparkling water, half watching the scene at the entrance from across the room. She had seen the whole thing. She watched Owen step to the side. She watched his posture, the way his shoulders didn't drop, the way he didn't look embarrassed or defeated, just rearranging. Like a man who had encountered this kind of obstacle before and had long since learned to root around it without wasting energy on the obstacle itself. Something about it sat wrong with her. She couldn't look away. Owen's project manager, a woman named Bex Larkin, picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Bex, I'm at the hotel. There's a problem with the reservation." Bex was quiet for a second. "What kind of problem?" "They say they can't find it. I made it 3 weeks ago," Bex said. "I have the confirmation number right here. Hold on." The sound of keyboard clicking. "Okay, the confirmation number is ALDC G7714, Suite 14B. 2 nights, checking in today. Can you call them directly and sort it out?" "I'm calling right now," Bex said. "Don't move." Owen put his phone in his pocket and waited. He looked at the fountain. He had built things larger and more complicated than this entire building. But he stood in the lobby of it like a man waiting at a bus stop, patient, contained, completely unbothered by the fact that he looked like he didn't belong, because belonging had never been something he needed other people to grant him. 2 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Bex again. "They found it," she said. Her voice had an edge. "The front desk person said there had been a system error." "There was no system error. I'm looking at the confirmation email right now and it's fine. Owen, I also called the manager on duty." "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Bex said, "because the way you described it is not a system error." The manager on duty was a man named Philip Crane, 48, 22 years in hotel management, currently 2 years into his tenure at the Alderton Grand. He was, in most respects, good at his job. He walked out from the back offices with the expressions of a man who hoped this was going to be quick. He saw Owen standing by the fountain, still in his flannel and his work boots, still carrying the canvas duffel. Something flickered across Crane's face. Not malice, more like an inherited instinct he hadn't yet examined closely enough to override. He walked over anyway. "Mr. Grady?" "That's right," Owen said. "I apologize for the confusion at the front entrance," Crane said. "We've located your reservation. I can check you in personally." "Appreciated," Owen said. Crane walked him to the desk. Stafford was still standing there. He looked at Owen, then at Crane, and the math was happening behind his eyes in real time. The slow, unpleasant calculation of someone's realizing they may have made an error. "Room key for Suite 14B, Crane said to the clerk beside Stafford. Then to Owen, "Will you be needing assistance with your luggage?" Owen held up the canvas duffel. "I think I've got it!" Something passed through the lobby then, a small shift. Stafford was very still, and then the doors opened again. 2 men came in, both in dark suits, both with the particular bearing of people who work in proximity to someone important. Behind them, a third man in a jacket, Owen's son, Marcus. Not this list's Marcus, a different one. A man named Marcus Grady, 33, who had his father's jaw and his mother's patience, and had flown in from the Chicago office that morning for the same groundbreaking meeting. He saw his father at the front desk, and his face did the thing it always did when he saw his father somewhere unexpected, a private relief, brief and fond. "Hey, Dad." "Hey," Owen said. Crane looked at the 2 men in dark suits. Something shifted in his posture, not dramatic, but visible to anyone paying attention. "Mr. Grady," one of the suited men said, and he was not talking to Owen. He was talking to Marcus. "Mayor Delacroix's office confirmed the 10 o'clock tomorrow. His deputy will meet you at the site at 9:30 for a walkthrough." The room was not silent, but certain people in it went quiet. Stafford Yates went quiet. Philip Crane went quiet. Sandra Cho, across the room with her sparkling water and her open laptop, closed the laptop. Owen glanced at the keycard in his hand. "I'm going to clean up," he said to Marcus. "I'll meet you downstairs at 7 works for me," Marcus said. Owen picked up his duffel and walked toward the elevator. He didn't look back at Stafford. He didn't need to. He had learned a long time ago that the most devastating thing a person could do to someone who had dismissed them was simply to continue existing unconcerned in full view. The elevator doors closed. Marcus Grady had not gone looking for a fight. He was not, by nature, a person who sought confrontation. He was an operations director who had learned from his father that the most durable way to win anything was to outlast it. But he had arrived 6 minutes before his father's exchange with Stafford ended. He had stood to the side, unnoticed, in the way that men in dark suits are often unnoticed when they're not yet relevant to a scene. And he had watched enough of it. He approached the front desk. "The man who just went upstairs," Marcus said, "is Owen Grady. He's the founder of Grady Construction Group, which built the Mercer Tower downtown, the pediatric wing at St. Augustine's, and is currently under contract for the Alderton Development Project, which includes, as I'm sure you're aware, the expansion of this hotel's Eastern Conference Center." Stafford said nothing. He has been doing business in this industry for over 40 years. He is not confused about where the service entrance is. He has never needed to use a service entrance in his life. Crane was listening from 4 feet away. "I'm not asking for an apology," Marcus said. "I'm making a statement of record." He picked up his own key card from the clerk who had materialized, efficient and silent, beside him. "My father built better buildings than this one," Marcus said, wearing exactly what he had on today. He walked toward the elevator. Bex Larskin, who had followed up the phone call with an email, which she had copied to 3 people, including the regional director of the hotel group, did not let the matter drop. She was thorough in the way that people who have spent careers protecting someone else's time and reputation learn to be thorough. She documented what Owen had told her. She documented the confirmation number. She documented the timeline of the phone call with Crane, during which Crane had used the phrase "system error" 4 times, and had not once asked what the guest had experienced or offered any form of direct acknowledgement. The email reached the regional director at 4:47 p.m. By 7:00 p.m., the same time Owen and Marcus were meeting downstairs for dinner, the regional director had spoken with the general manager. By 8 p.m., an internal review had been opened. Owen didn't know any of this over dinner. He and Marcus ate at the hotel restaurant, which was decent, and talked about the groundbreaking logistics and about Marcus's daughter, who was 4, and had recently decided that her primary personality trait was asking why in response to every statement made by any adult within earshot. Owen found this delightful. Marcus found it exhausting and also delightful, though he was at the stage where he couldn't always access the delight immediately. A server named Delphine, young, attentive, completely unaware of anything that had happened in the lobby, brought Owen a second glass of water without being asked and refilled the breadbasket twice. This was what Owen noticed, not what had happened at the door, not the conversation at the front desk, the breadbasket. People who have spent their whole lives being underestimated tend to be more attuned to kindness than to its absence. The absence is familiar. The kindness is the thing worth noting. The next morning, Owen was at the construction site by 7. He was wearing the same boots, different flannel, same canvas duffel bag, with a change of clothes and a rolled set of blueprints. He walked the site for 2 hours before anyone else arrived, making notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting, so small it was nearly illegible to everyone except Bex, who had been decoding it for 11 years. The deputy from the mayor's office arrived at 9:30. Her name was Claudia Reyes. She was professional, prepared, and visibly startled when Marcus introduced Owen. "You're Owen Grady?" she said. "Last time I checked," he said. Claudia had spent 3 hours the night before reading about Grady Construction Group in preparation for this walkthrough. She had looked up the project portfolio. She had seen the photographs of Owen at ribbon cuttings, at hearings, at site walkthroughs, always in the same kind of clothes, always with the same expression, unhurried and unbothered and clearly in charge of whatever room he was in. She had not put together that the man she would be meeting would look exactly like those photographs. "It's a real honor," she said, and meant it. Owen nodded. He turned back to the site. "Let me show you where we're starting," he said. What happened at the Alderton Grand that afternoon, while Owen and Marcus were off-site at a follow-up meeting, did not involve Owen at all. The general manager, a woman named Frances Whitlock, called Stafford Yates into her office at 2 o'clock. She had a printed copy of Bex Larkin's email on the desk in front of her. She had been in hotel management for 16 years. She had seen a version of what Stafford had done before, not always with the same guest, zest, not always with the same details, but the same essential architecture. The assumption that determined where someone was supposed to stand before a single fact had been established. The closed window, the system error. She did not yell. She did not perform. She spoke to Stafford the way you speak to someone when you want them to actually hear you rather than defend themselves. "He's the client," she said. "Not because of who he is, because he walked in the door." That is the entirety of the relevant information. Stafford looked at his hands. "His company's contract with this property," Frances said, "is for an $8 million renovation of our east wing. But I want to be clear that I would be having this exact conversation if he were checking in for a single night in our smallest room, because that is also the entirety of the relevant information." She laid out what would happen next. A formal, written warning, mandatory retraining, a review period. His employment at the Alderton Grand, going forward, was contingent on demonstrated change. Stafford was 24 years old and had made a mistake the way 24-year-olds make mistakes. Fast, without thinking, drawing on reflexes he had absorbed from the world and had never been challenged to examine. Frances did not fire him. She had considered it. She had decided that firing him would relieve him of the discomfort he needed to sit with, and that sitting with discomfort was the only thing that actually changed people. "You'll send a written apology to Mr. Grady," she said, "through the front office. Formal letterhead." "Yes, ma'am," Stafford said. "And you'll mean it," Frances said, "or it won't count." Owen received the letter the following morning, the day he was checking out. He read it standing at the front desk. His expression didn't change much. He folded it and put it in his duffel. Frances Whitlock introduced herself and offered a direct apology. "I appreciate it," Owen said. "We'll do better," she said. Owen looked at her for a moment. He believed her. He had a reasonable ability, developed over decades of assessing crews and subcontractors and partners, to tell the difference between people who said what was expected and people who meant what they said. "I know you will," he said. He shook her hand. It was not a small handshake. 40 years of concrete and steel had made his grip into something particular, and Frances felt it the whole walk back to her office. At the airport, Owen sat in the terminal waiting for his flight. He was wearing the same boots. He had the same duffel. A man across from him in a tailored suit was watching him in the way people sometimes watch someone who doesn't fit their expectations for the space, trying to place them. Owen didn't notice. He was reading a worn paperback, a history of the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the engineers who had built it, men and women who had moved mountains, literally, and whose names most people had never learned. He had been reading about builders for 40 years. He found something quietly satisfying in the continuity of it, the way that the work had always been the thing, the way that the work didn't ask what you were wearing when you showed up to do it. His phone buzzed Bex, confirming the next site visit, this time in Pittsburgh. He typed back, "Works for me." He went back to his book. The man across from him in the tailored suit was still watching, still trying to place him. He couldn't. Some people can't be placed. They don't fit into the categories available. The categories aren't built for them, because the people who built those categories never imagined someone like Owen Grady standing at their door, someone who had built more in his life than most people would ever walk through, who wore it in his hands and his posture, and the particular stillness of a man who had nothing left to prove to anyone, including himself. The boarding announcement came. Owen closed his book, picked up his duffel, and got in line. He did not use the priority lane, even though his ticket entitled him to it. He had never understood the point of arriving somewhere a few minutes sooner than everyone else. Where he came from, the job wasn't done until it was done. And the only thing that mattered after that was what you built next. That tells you everything you need to know about Owen Grady. What it tells you about the people who looked at him and saw only the boots. That's something worth sitting with.